Whispers from Below, a horror podcast by Justin W. Geis. Scary stories, both real and fake. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 10 of Whispers from Below, a podcast by a madman for mad men. I'm your resident psychopath, Justin W. Geis, and today's topic of discussion is Mary Stauffer. Before I get into the episode, one thing I do want to point out is that I have decided on a solid number per season that I'm going to try to do. Thank you all for sticking with me as I maneuver and figure out, how I want to work everything with this podcast, since it's almost been, 9 months of doing this, which is crazy to think. But I'm still sort of figuring out kinks and stuff like that, because I'm new to this. So it looks like I'm going to be doing about 15 episodes per season. So we are coming up on sort of a closing couple episodes for season 2, and then I'll take some time off, and then we'll start up again with season 3. The other thing I want to say is that this episode has some pretty disturbing info in it. Even for me, I was a little creeped out by this episode. It is also one of my worst fears, so we'll talk about that as we get into it. But just as a note, this is probably not an episode, I would say most likely to definitely not an episode for any younger listeners out there. Come back next week. I'm sure I'll have content for you, but this week is just a little dark. So keep that in mind. That's pretty much it for now. I'll talk about the other stuff at the end. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Mary Stauffer. This is a story about a woman that was abducted when she was 36. She got abducted with her 8-year-old daughter, Elizabeth Stauffer. They were kidnapped by Ming Sen Shiui. I hope I say that right. Or Shiu probably. I hope I say that right. They got kidnapped on May 16th, 1980. This is a little bit of you need a little bit of background on less her and more him to sort of understand what happened in this situation. And it is a story about her getting kidnapped. And spoiler alert, she does live. Though with the stuff that happened to her, it's more of a was living the best option for her. It's one of those scenarios where it's just so sad what happened, and it's so disturbing, and it just sucks that ever happened at all. But then, you live, and then you have to kind of live with that information, that knowledge for the rest of your life. Just kind of sucks. It's a little bit of background on Stauffer herself. She was a rather religious woman. That comes into play later, so it is important to know that she really valued religion and spirituality and that sort of thing. She talks a lot in interviews, that really got me through everything that happened, was the knowledge that God was watching over me and whatever. She taught math at Alexander Ramsey High School in Roseville, Minnesota. So this all pretty much takes place in Minnesota for the most part. Midwest, look at you got all the crazies, huh? But she taught, I believe, 9th grade algebra, I think was her forte, her specialty, but she taught math. Maybe she jumped around, I'm not entirely sure, but for the purposes of this, she did also teach 9th grade algebra. And she taught Shiu's, I'm going to say Shiu. If that's wrong, I'm really sorry, but it's spelled Shiue. So I'm really trying to say it correctly. If I'm not, I apologize. Well, not really. He's an awful person. So even if I'm saying it wrong, whatever. But I feel, whatever. Pronunciation is important. She taught his 9th grade math class, which is where he sort of developed his crush on her. And I put crush in quotes because it's more of an obsession, and it sparks really, really quickly. But we need a little bit more background on him now before we sort of get into any other crazy things that happen. So he was born on October 15th, 1950 in Taiwan. And his family moved to Minnesota at the age of 8. It was his mom, his dad, and he had 2 younger siblings. His father died 3 years later, but he was a professor in Minnesota. He was reported as being like an extremely violent, angry child, especially towards like his younger siblings. He would often beat them up both in adolescence and even when they became adults. I guess a lot of times he would beat the crap out of his siblings, which like, look, I have 2 older brothers and I 100% fully understand when you're kids beating the crap out of one another. I get it. However, when you become adults, you don't do that anymore. Like, that's just not something that you participate in. You're an adult. You've learned. But he clearly didn't learn. Um, in his teen years, he would set fires in people's apartments. He set fires in the apartments of 3 different strangers, as well as vandalizing cars by throwing heavy rocks or bricks at them. In light of the arsons, he was sort of like sentenced, ordered, however you want to put it, to have psychotherapy done when he was 14. During all of this, they were like, yeah, he's got a little bit of some issues, but he just like doesn't quite understand like consequence, which is the big thing. And his mother testified that she was scared of him frequently, and she said that he had no feelings like a dog. His own mother was like, my son has no feelings like a dog. Can you imagine if your mother was like, yeah, my, you know, blank, daughter, son, they, whatever, is like a dog. Like, that cuts deep for some reason. Like, we all love dogs. I have one. I love them so much. But to be called one is like very demoralizing, It's like very demeaning is more the word I'm looking for. It sucks. But he kind of deserved it. So I guess, I don't know. I have weird empathy for people. Like, even though I know he's a terrible person and I know what he did. And this is a relatively famous story, so I'm sure a lot of you also know what he did. But still, like, this poor dude, that sucks. Regardless of who you are, your mother, like, basically calling you an animal sucks. Not basically, she did. Anyway, off topic. He began sexually fantasizing about Stauffer when she was his teacher. And he admits this later, like in court and stuff like that. But he began like not only like having like a slight crush on her, but he would like often think of her in these like really strange sexual scenarios. One of which was like a consensual sex story that he ended up writing. And then it sort of devolved into even like rape scenes with her where she wasn't into it and he like kidnapped her and raped her. And then like gang rape scenes. And he would write all these stories out and sort of use them for sexual pleasure. And then obviously, as we all know, he started to stalk her a little bit at a time. Sort of finding her after class, hanging around, talking to her, whatever. She was like, whatever, I don't really, I'm a religious woman and I have a husband and children and like, I just don't care. And then the fantasies basically did not really satisfy him anymore. And so he decided that he would have to kidnap her in order to fulfill his fantasies. I don't know about you, but I personally hate having to go to the grocery store. It takes up so much of my day when I could be starting a new hobby with that time, like soap carving, or collecting the sick bags out of airplanes. With Instacart, it makes grocery shopping fast and easy, all while allowing me to stay in my underwear. Instacart allows you to order all of the things you usually get from your local stores, delivered to your door in as fast as 1 hour. Not only that, but it will also give you smart suggestions for new items based off of your preferences, as well as highlight deals to help you save some money. The shoppers handpick perfect produce and make sure that your eggs get to you safely. You can get free delivery on your first order over $35 by following the link in the show notes. This also lets Instacart know that we sent you, and it helps support Whispers from Below. So if you hate grocery shopping as much as I do, try Instacart today and enjoy getting your groceries the easy way. In 1975, so we cut ahead quite a lot from ninth grade. But he's now 25. He believed that she had lived in a house in Duluth. And he ended up breaking into the house with a gun, but she actually didn't live there. It was her in-laws that owned the house and were living there at the time. Shiyu forced them to the ground and tied them up before threatening them. He said, "I will kill you if you report this crime. I swear to God, I know where you live. I know how to break in. I will kill you if you report this." And they were like, okay. So the home invasion actually wasn't reported until Stauffer's disappearance. And then they were like, oh, this must be linked. So then they reported it. Who knows what would have happened if they would have reported it sooner? We can only speculate about, what would have happened in that event. But just interesting to note that they were so scared that they didn't do it. At the time, Stauffer was actually working at a Christian missionary in the Philippines with her husband. That's why it's important that she's religious. We love God and Jesus. And it pretty much literally saved her life for a little bit of time. As she was there helping, teaching, doing what she could for the community. Shiyu was looking for them in Minnesota, but they were literally in the Philippines, and so he couldn't find them. Once she returned to Minnesota, which was in 1979, so he's been looking for them for 4 years trying to find her. She ended up returning to Minnesota in 1979, and Shiyu found out that she had started living at Bethel University. She was living on campus, and he started to stalk her. The stalking continued for a while, about a year, until the eventual kidnapping, as I mentioned earlier, which was on May 16th, 1980. Shiyu kidnapped her and her daughter at gunpoint as they left a salon in Roseville, Minnesota. He tied them up and threw them into the trunk of Stauffer's car, so not his, her car, and then drove off. It's important to note that he did have a gun, so they were sort of they couldn't really do anything. I'm unclear about the implications of trying to kidnap someone outside of a salon. It seems like a pretty, at least the salons I've been to, maybe this one was shady, I don't know. But it seems like one of those things that it would be easy to see if somebody was pointing a gun at someone and tying them up and putting them in a car. But maybe he brought them into the alley or something like that. I'm unclear about how all that went down. But he got away with it, so good for him. His plan was to drive to his house where he would keep them captive and rape Stauffer repeatedly. But what ended up happening was that he actually had to stop twice while he was kidnapping them because they kept making too much noise in the trunk. So he would stop and threaten them or, hit them or whatever to get them to stop. And on the second time that he stopped, this is really tragic. This young 6-year-old, he's 6. This young 6-year-old boy named Jason Wilkman approached the car to sort of see what was happening. He saw that the trunk was open and he saw people in there and he's 6. So he goes over to see if they need help. He's wondering what's going on. And then Shiui, forced him, grabs him, shoves him, forces him, however you want to word it, into the trunk of the car. And then he drives to Carlos Avery Wildlife Refuge in Anoka County. And for those of you that are unaware, I was myself before I did this research. Carlos Avery Wildlife Refuge is a very secluded place. There's not a lot going on there, or at least at the time there wasn't. So it was a very secluded place. So he drives all the way over there. He removes the boy from the car and then beats him to death with a metal rod. So, in the words of John Mulaney, we don't have time to unpack all of that, but he murdered a 6-year-old boy. So, clearly this man is not someone that should be fucked with. We can all see that, and we could have seen that if he would have gotten proper, care or something like that when he was a kid. Maybe if he would have just, I don't know, seen a therapist, that could have helped. But you can see even his mom when he's a young kid is I'm scared of him. I don't know what he's gonna do. When he's 14. So now that he's 25, what is he now at this point? 30 maybe? I just don't that's like not a safe environment for a 30-year-old man with no like mental awareness. Like he's putting himself in a situation that's dangerous just by like existing, which like is a weird thought. Like he's a danger to society just by being alive and being the way that he is, and he doesn't know it. Like, or maybe he does. Regardless, it's just gross. He murders the 6-year-old boy. Once he gets to his house, that's the last time he stops, and he ends up getting to his house. He locks them both inside of a really small closet before he removes Stauffer and ends up tying her to some of the furniture in his living room. He talks to her for hours and tells all of these weird stories and talks about how, I was in your class and I loved you and you're so sexy and I just want to fuck you and like whatever. And this all happened on the first night. He speaks to her for hours on the first night, not really any time past that. He recorded the conversation on a video camera, which I'm interested as to why he recorded the conversation. I get like a lot of people when they have like they kidnap people or whatever, they'll record like the rapes, but it doesn't make sense to me to record the conversation prior, because like what about that is like endearing for your sexual fan? Maybe it's part of his like script because he wrote like full scenes. I don't know. That part's a little off to me. I mean, the whole thing. Okay, so full disclosure, the whole thing is off. Duh, we know that. But like specifically that part seems like out of the ordinary for a case like this. It's just very interesting. But he recorded the whole conversation on a camera, and then he raped her repeatedly. And that was also caught on camera. He ended up telling her while he was talking to her who he was. He gave her his name, the fact that he was in her class when he was in 9th grade. And he made up this story that she gave him a B+ in algebra, which ended up ruining his perfect grades, his perfect score. And therefore he couldn't get a scholarship, so he couldn't go to college. He couldn't afford it. So then he got drafted into the Vietnam War and eventually became a prisoner of war. And that's why he's fucked up. And that's why she needs to be punished. None of that is true. Like 100% none of that is accurate. Maybe the B+. Maybe she did give him a B+. Like, I don't know. But he didn't participate in the Vietnam War, and he was not a prisoner of war. So he's making up this story to sort of justify his actions, if that makes sense, which I think shows a little bit of a psychosis of remorse. I've used that word in so many episodes, and I'm probably not using it right. But he's showing remorse. He's like, well, I have to make up a reason that's justified so that she understands what she did to me, when in reality, she did nothing to him. He's just a crazy psychotic man. But just interesting to sort of see his brain sort of devolve. These are all untrue, as I said before. He also says that he's going to like kill her husband and her son if she tries to escape, which I'm not really going to put that past him after you watched him kill a 6-year-old boy. I mean, I'm pretty sure he would kill anyone to keep you there. So that kind of makes sense. They often were separated, her and her daughter, while they were in captivity, and Shiyu ended up like continuing to go to work and then coming home and raping her. And then he would often, when he went to work, he would lock Elizabeth in like a spot in his van. He would like lock her up while he was at work, and then like Mary would stay in the closet. But on this day, they were both in the closet and they were shackled up together, like chained together. On July 7th, 1980, after Shiyu leaves for work, Stauffer managed to remove the hinge pin from the locked closet door. She managed to kind of pop it out, which allowed them to escape. So she hobbles with her daughter into the kitchen, and she calls the police. They call the authorities, whatever they have to do, and then they hide behind a car that's in Shiyu's driveway until the police arrive, and she's free. Now, I want you to keep in mind that she was kidnapped on, May 16th, and then she got out July 7th. So she was in captivity for 52 days. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, I have a previous episode about a kidnapping. That's about JC Dugard, and she was in captivity for like 15 years or something like that. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but can you imagine for like that amount of time not knowing if you're going to live to see the next day? At least with JC Dugard, she knew she was going to live. It just wasn't going to be a pleasant life. But I believe she sort of had this knowledge of like, I'm going to survive. These two people had no idea if they were going to live the next day for 52 days. Like that, and maybe I counted that wrong. It could be like 51 or 53, somewhere in there. But that's absolutely ridiculous to me. That is so crazy and scary and horrifying. I've talked about it before in previous episodes, but being stalked and kidnapped, they are my biggest fears. I cannot imagine the fear of knowing that somebody is watching your every single move, or kidnapping you and you don't know what the next day is going to bring, but you know that it's going to fucking suck and there's nothing you can do. Like, I cannot imagine that. That is so horrifying to me. Like, I've had so many like recurring nightmares with that scenario. I just got chills, and it's so hot in this room. Like, I'm sweating and I just got chills. It makes me so uncomfortable. Anyway, she escapes, and she was arrested the same day at work. While he's in jail, this bitch fucks up even more, and he tries to propose a deal with a fellow inmate named Richard Green. He tries to give him $50,000 to kill Stauffer and her daughter so that they can't testify, and to come back and help him escape jail. Green ends up telling the FBI. I wrote, he told the FBI, whoops, I guess. Like, what loyalty does this man have to you? The answer's none. He has absolutely no loyalty to you. Why do you think that offering him any sort of funds would do literally anything for you? I just don't understand that concept. Anyway, so he ends up telling the FBI, which is used in his trial. His first trial, he gets, I believe the first trial is for the murder of Jason Wilkman, I believe, or the first one is for the kidnapping, something like that. I don't really do the trial stuff. For those of you that don't know and are new to the podcast, I don't really talk about the legal jargon stuff because I'm more interested in the case itself and the aftermath and the before math sort of scenario. I don't really like the legal stuff. But he was found guilty in the first trial in 1980. And then in 1981, they had a second trial. And during this trial, this is the only reason I'm talking about it, shit got weird and crazy and awful. He managed to smuggle a knife into court. When Stauffer went up to the stand to testify, he leapt over the table, ran up to her and started attacking her, and ended up slashing her face open. He slashed pretty much from like, I would say like just underneath, well, it's even further. It's like the middle, like, you know where people get cheek piercings? A little bit further back than that. A little bit further back than where like a dimple would be. All the way down to her mouth, Joker style, and then it goes underneath her mouth. You can look up pictures of the scar. It's huge. It's a huge gash in her face. He was screaming at her that, you know, once he got released from prison, he was gonna fucking kill her and her daughter and all this stuff. She ended up needing to get 62 stitches to seal up her face. It was slashed open so badly. And she still has a scar to this day. He was sentenced to 70 years for kidnapping and murdering Jason Wilkman. So he got his original trial, he was sentenced to 30 years, and then the second trial, they sentenced him to 40. So in total, he had 70 years. But he ended up being eligible for parole in 2010. But they ruled that he was still a danger to society regardless of, you know, whatever. So his sentence was changed to life in prison. That's pretty much the whole story. He's like still alive as far as I know. and so is, Mary and her daughter and her son and her husband and all that. I'm pretty sure they're all still alive. Because this wasn't that long ago, Um, I think the scariest part about this case in particular is that Mary was like unaware that she was being stalked. As far as I know, there's no record of her filing for, you know, um, any sort of what is it called? I'm blanking on the name. Where they're like they can't come near you. They can't. I'm gonna sound like such an idiot because I can't remember the name. Where they're like, you can't come near me, like I have the paper, which like that paper, I talked about it before in the Rebecca Schaefer episode. It doesn't do anything. It's a piece of paper. What is that piece of paper going to do when he's at your door with a gun? Like restraining order. Oh my God, all of you are screaming at home right now. But like for real though, I understand there's not much that the police can do, right? But a restraining order is a really great idea until he's at your door with a gun. What is that little piece of paper going to do for you? What is it going to do? Like, and I don't know what the solution is, but it's just something that I think is horrifying to think of. It's such an impossible situation because you don't know what that person's going to do, but neither do the police. So like, how can they protect you properly if nobody knows what's going to happen? You know what I mean? And there have been cases of stalkers. I'm thinking of doing an episode on this particular case that I'm thinking of that I'm going to reference in a future at a later date. But basically he like went in and like shot up an entire workplace just to kill her because he was obsessed with her and she kept denying him after only like 4 months of knowing each other. Like it can escalate so fast, but then there have been other cases where they stalk the person for like years and years and years and like 15 years before doing anything. It's just crazy. Like this stuff is wild. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, this is a really popular story. It's been featured on TV shows. Lifetime produced a movie about it in 2019. 2019. I had to check my notes for that one. I was going to say it, but then I was like, I hope I'm not wrong. They produced a movie called Abducted, the Mary Stauffer story. It was produced by Lifetime in 2019. Lily from How I Met Your Mother plays Mary Stauffer. I haven't watched it yet, but it is on my bucket list now. I kind of want to see it just to sort of see how they portrayed the whole scenario without it being over dramatized, and I hope it's very realistic in how it's done. But like just such a scary story, and I've talked about it again a couple times now and a couple times in the past. Kidnapping and stalking is my ultimate worst fear. Like, no, I don't like clowns, I don't like dolls, and I don't like kids in horror movies. I think clowns are horrifying, I think dolls are really scary, whatever. But like things that I wake up in a cold sweat from is like being kidnapped or like being stalked for like days and days and days and years on end. Like so scary. So scary. And there's like not anything to do. Like you get assaulted, you go to the police. There's stuff to be done. You get stalked. There's virtually nothing you can do for that stalker until they do something to harm you. And then they can get arrested. But you have to wait till you get hurt or die before that person gets caught. And that to me is so horrifying. On that note, that's pretty much all I have for this episode. By the time this goes up, just a life update. By the time this goes up, I will have just had yet another surgery during the pandemic. Just really living it up over here. So depending on how much pain I'm in, I might be able to upload an episode the following Monday after this goes up. I don't know yet. I hope so. I believe I'll be able to do it. But if I'm in a lot of pain and I don't think I can do it, then I won't do it. And I will update you guys via Instagram. For those of you that don't know, this podcast has a lovely Instagram at Whispers From Below. No spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing. You can follow me there. And that's honestly the best way to get updates about the podcast because I really don't really post anywhere else about it. Except like my personal Instagram, which is linked in the podcast one if you care about my life and the things I do. But yeah, pretty much we'll see about next week. But there will be 5 more episodes this season, and I'm going to try to keep that the consistent at 15 episodes. But I might need to take a week off and then sort of come back to it depending on the pain level and stuff like that. It's not going to be the same as when I got my deviated septum fixed because it's my ankle. So I should be able to do it, but depending on how everything goes, you never know how you're going to be until after it's done. In other news, I have been posting pictures from a photo shoot I did with my lovely roommate, Devin. And I tag him in the pictures so you can go look at his stuff. He's super talented, super amazing at what he does, which is dancing and singing and acting, but then also photography. So you can go check him out. He's pretty awesome. But I'm posting pictures from that, and I just posted a picture recently about the sweatshirt that I had designed. It has the Whispers from Below logo on the back of it, and on the hood there's the little Whispers from Below fangs. It's super cute. It's super comfy. I can get it in, I believe, black, blue, and then possibly like a maroon or a white. But those are a little bit harder than the black and blue to find. But it's very cute. Please go check it out. I'm going to be posting more pictures of some of the merchandise that I have been, wearing in my own personal life, using in my own personal life. And if any of you guys are interested in that, I should be getting a website uploaded pretty soon. And then that'll be something that if I get enough orders, I can do a big bulk order and sort of get stuff to you guys if you're interested in that sort of thing. That's pretty much it. So, remember, stalkers are absolutely horrifying. Apparently you can sneak a knife into court when you're in jail. I don't know how that happens. And keep washing your hands. Keep being safe. You are not a Karen, and this pandemic is not over.